do you not let your budget become kind of like a golden handcuff in terms of having faith and for supernatural provision? Because on one hand, you could put it out and say, you know what, God, I want this. On the other hand, you can say, no, we stick to budget. You know, we will make this happen. Could over budgeting go against walking in your faith?
I could see how you could take it there, because the budget looks like something that you can control. I think this is where kind of what I just shared actually has felt really powerful, though, is when you think about what you actually want, a lot of times you realize that doesn't have a place in your budget. And honestly, I think those check-in times have been the thing that actually helped my heart from getting kind of wrapped up in what the thing that we could control, which was our budget. And then I will say we actually change our budget too. Again, the budget is a tool that serves your family. Your family doesn't serve the budget, so we do change it based on what we feel like is happening in that season in our lives.
He's the Lord of the budget, and we've set up, for us it's a quarterly rhythm of sitting before the Lord and saying, are these things in line with it's your money, Lord, or like, is there anything you want to change here? And then in unity, like all we're trying to get to is making decisions together in unity. So if you look at each other and say, I want to empty the bank accounts, and you're like, yep, that's from the Lord, let's roll. And there's no pathway to hit the budget, rock and roll. You have unity and you know exactly what you're doing.
I would say it's those check-in times though, and this is where also, you know, it's if you have a partner that you know is leaning after the Lord, it does help me feel like I have another way that my heart's going to be safe from thinking that I'm doing it, or kind of from grabbing that control, partially because we've given each other control over the budget. So I think this is really like, where's your heart when you're kind of approaching doing the budget? And then we always, you know, like there are other things in our lives where we set up safety nets for ourselves. If you know that you're prone to fall into temptation with pornography, for example, you're probably going to set up a safety net for yourself. Whether you're going to have people that are accountable for you, with you, or you're going to set up things so that you know that you're not going to be tempted into that. Similarly, if you think that the budget is going to be a place where your heart is tempted into control or tempted into greed, kind of what can I gain, or constantly checking on the bank accounts, and this is an area where we set in different measures that keep our hearts safe. So, because honestly, like my heart isn't always safe around money. There's a lot of fun things in the world that we can want, and they're not good for our family, and they're not actually the thing that I really want, right? And to that end, they become a thing that keeps me from seeing the Lord and from loving Him. So,
may I suggest that it will be much easier for your spouse to see that than you. And the hard thing is to see your spouse controlling it and to hold that before the Lord. It's much more likely that you're going to feel like your spouse is controlling the budget, and that you're going to have to sit before the Lord and say, I feel controlled. How do I talk? And just work through if that makes sense. It's the evil one likes to grab onto things that have shreds of truth, if that makes sense. So that's probably more likely to be the issue. But if you feel it, again, just like Larissa said, like if we're feeling like, Lord, my heart is, something's going wrong around the budget. I feel this grabbing and trying to control with it, and just sitting before the Lord and going, Lord, why does my heart keep doing this around the budget? I don't like what my heart is doing. Would you fix it? You know?
And then like practically, we actually, Wes is an advisor. He could do all of that for our family. We do pay somebody else. Partially, again, is that safeguard. Like we need somebody to be accountable who sees all of our decisions that we're making with our money, both like this year and how we're projecting out for the future. And so we have a financial planner that we use, mostly because we know that we need somebody who's going to check in with us on that. And he's a believer, and he knows our hearts, and he knows our values, and he knows what we want to do with our money. And he's also there to what? To be like, hey, y'all said you wanted to give more, and instead you did this. How's that vacation? How's the giving? You know, right? Like, so,
he's one of a group of 4 guys that we've committed to actually just walk in complete transparency in our finances. It's very un-American, but if you have some friends that are willing to walk with you and be totally transparent, the natural state of the American society is that no one will know your finances except potentially a professional that you pay. If you have the friends that could walk with you, it's rare. Like, these have to be people you actually trust,
and they don't judge us, right? It's just people we've chosen to be transparent with.
Can I add something?
Yeah.
So, when you're thinking about budgets, think about kingdom.
Yeah.
Think bigger than the money that you have. So God has all of this money, and He's giving some to you, and some to you, and some to you, and He's investing in what's in your heart. He's investing in what's in your heart. He's investing, and then He wants you to take what He's invested in your heart and begin to multiply that and steward that stuff so it'll grow, right? So it's bigger than just what I'm spending on, going out to eat and doing this and doing that. It's all part of this kingdom that He's growing, and as royalty, it's our responsibility to steward the part of the kingdom that's right in front of us. And we're stewarding something that belongs to Him and growing it and multiplying it. It's that whole, He's given us $100 and we've multiplied it, or 10, and then we multiplied it times 10. And He gives us not just our multiplication, but somebody else's that buried it. So believing that there's this grip on us and there's control that's bearing what's been trusted to us, and that whole parable that Jesus laid out. But realizing this is so much bigger than me. If you have that thing inside of you, I want to be a part of something bigger than myself, which I think it's innate, put in us, created in us, that we all want to be like superheroes, right? We all want to fly. Who wants to fly one day, right? Want to be in the Matrix and break through and do all kinds of crazy things. It starts what we're faithful with in the small things, and being able to multiply it and trust it and steward it. It's stewarding all these little things. And finances it's like a tricycle for the kingdom.
Yeah.
If we can learn this, our finances, then we get trusted with cities. You're getting entrusted with cities. Yeah.
That's so good.
Well, I have a couple of questions. So, do you guys use a program for your budgeting, or do you do it on paper? And then I have another question after that.
We use You Need a Budget. It's YNAB, younneedabudget.com. We used Excel for a while. Do you use YNAB? We like YNAB. It's just You Need a Budget.
Okay.
But I used Excel for 12 or
12
13
years.
before.
12 years we used Excel.
Yeah.
And then we switched to that software.
Okay.
And there are other good ones out there that other people have used and
Yeah, Mint
recommended.
works is free and it works as well.
We do like YNAB though. It's easy for us to kind of both be working on it. And
I will say that I argued with my financial planner friend about whether Mint or YNAB was better, and he finally admitted that if he wasn't deep in the Mint system, he would switch to YNAB. So, just saying. So, I think I won that argument. So.
And then this is kind of random. So with the joint accounts, how do you guys do surprises for each other?
Everyone asks us every time.
It's a good one. It's a really good question.
So within our budget, we each have money that is
It's good to highlight, actually. Yeah.
It's Christi money, and it's Wes money, and that's actually the categories in our budget. It's titled Christi and it's titled Wes. And within those categories, we get to do whatever we want with that money. Like I think Wes said last time, someone asked him about my Christi money, and he's like, she could burn it on the street for all I care. And it really is true. Like it's money that is used at your discretion. So a lot of times we will buy gifts out of that so that it feels like I gave up something for him to get it. That said, I tend to spend all of mine on like myself. And so I'm like, I bought you a gift out of the grocery budget. Because I'm creative with the categories like that.
That's awesome.
But that's the intention. And then, you know, to surprise each other, like, honestly, I felt really proud of myself. I surprised him with a trip one year for Christmas. And he knew that we were going to go on a trip because I said, hey, don't work these days.
And we pre-decided actually a budget that we wanted to do a trip that quarter or something.
Yep, I said, hey, if we were to do a trip, you know, just the two of us, how much would you want to spend on it? So we pre-agreed on how much we were going to spend on the trip, and I booked the days, and then I booked everything else. And of course I did that on our credit card. But, you know, it still felt like a great surprise to him, and he doesn't like planning trips, and so, you know, it blessed him, and it was a good gift. But
It was fun.
and then, you know, we use other people
Yeah, like she gets
if we need to. So
the Amazon emails all go to her account, so it's not
Yeah.
like if I'm ordering on Amazon, it's the worst surprise ever that it went straight to it.
Yeah.
So I'll be like, hey, can I use your Amazon account and PayPal you some money? And then all she sees is PayPal. It's actually fairly difficult to see what's coming. So yeah.
So it really doesn't actually end up hampering our ability to surprise or give to each other. There are ways around it.
I mean, love's
And
creative
honestly,
and fun,
sometimes I do tuck things that he doesn't know about, and I tuck them in grocery, and then I like put some grocery money in my. You know, again, this is our budget. We're in charge of it. So if I want to be creative like that, I am. So
I have a follow-up question on YNAB.
Yeah.
And it's funny that you mentioned it, I'm glad you asked, because I literally just created a Mint account and a YNAB, and I was gonna see.
They're the two. If you're wondering, those are the two you'll be deciding it about.
How long, because I know with YNAB, there's a little bit more of a learning curve.
Mhm.
How long did it take you guys to like feel like you're up and running, and did you get like?
It was a couple months,
It was
I
a
think,
couple
before we felt like we really understood it.
yeah, we switched. I mean, we were switching from Excel, which I felt like actually the benefit of Excel is we had a lot of control. Like we were manipulating every cell, and so sometimes within the software, things would just kind of move around. Like, why did that move around there? Or like you have to go in and set the budget categories. And actually, the thing that I dislike about YNAB is that if you go over in a category, it won't automatically subtract it from your next month. Because like Wes was saying, that money comes from somewhere. So sometimes, like my old system is I was just used to, if I, like for example, if I spent too much on groceries that month, it would automatically subtract $100 from my following month. And YNAB doesn't do that, so I have to be a little bit more proactive.
So the way you trick it is you just take the following month's purchase and move the date.
And I move the dates. So that's how we do it, is we just start being a little bit more creative with the dates. So that actually took a little bit of adjusting. So probably a couple months, but we're happy with it now.
Cool. And you connect it to the bank accounts and everything,
And really there's no one system. It's whatever works for and catalyzes you two to have good conversations to where you're heading off to dinner and you both know that there's budget for it and you get to go have a great dinner. Like that's what we're going for.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So I've been wondering. I've kind of talked to Madison about like our budgets and stuff, just a little bit, but I feel like I should draw back a little bit. And I was wondering, when would be a good time to actually be open with all of your budget? Like considering what you guys said.
It's a really good question.
Later on, you guys wish you would have done it. So when would you guys think like would be a good, valid time to just be like, okay, here it is, and then we can just talk about it?
Are we allowed to phone a friend?
I say before you propose,
Yeah.
Yeah.
you don't wanna say yes to someone that you don't know everything about.
That's good.
Yeah, but like say we're engaged, like then or before the engagement?
I'm-
or
Can
before?
you clarify for me what are we disclosing? Are we
Just like
talking
what you
about
guys are
setting
saying,
up a
just like
budget or?
every dollar has a name, just kinda like.
Oh, like
looking
when
at-
would you do that together?
Yeah, and
when
just
would you
like
kind of-
also just like seeing each other's like expenses and also what we're spending our money on, like that kind of stuff.
I would say actually engagement is it. So you know, before you get engaged, obviously you would want to check and say like, hey, how's our debt situation, right? Or you know, basically if you have any big financial goals, that would be a great time while you're dating to talk about what those are, because that's definitely going to impact your future kind of, and generally how you view finances. But in terms of kind of going over your expenses, I would start when you're engaged, because you do want to have a little bit of a kind of a track record before you really have to merge those finances. And if there's gonna be some hard conversations, I would think it would be easier to kind of iron out how you're gonna live together, how you're gonna manage some of those joint money before, start the conversation. I don't think you can necessarily start the conversation too early, but in terms of kind of talking and tracking spending.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Dawn,
That's
what
my,
do you?
I just think debt, if there's no debt, that
Yeah.
all needs to be addressed.
Yeah.
before
That's
you
where
do
my head is
things.
going, is these kind of big block items, like,
Yeah,
if
before.
you know you're gonna inherit $10 million, and it's gonna, or if you have crazy debt, like the kind of big block, like this could affect your decision to marry me, sort of thing.
Yeah.
Like those things are worth, but whether you're spending $30 on coffee or $50 on coffee, probably don't need to talk to you before you put a ring on her, like, that makes sense,
Yeah, honestly, and, may I see something?
yeah.
Okay, one thing we need to keep sight of is what is money? That money is literally what we get in exchange for our time. Okay, and what is our time but our life itself? So what we spend our money on is literally what we're spending our lives on.
So I was just thinking where your heart is, or where your heart is, that's your treasure.
Where your heart is, that's where your treasure is also, right? Or your treasure is, that's where your heart is.
Yeah.
So, your money is an expression of yourself. It is a physical manifestation of your time. And so it's very precious in that sense. So you don't want to waste it. But it's also, when you're revealing that to your significant other, it is an act of intimacy, right? And intimacy is a process, okay? You don't obviously want to do this on the first date, is you don't sit there and lay out your checkbook, right? That would be weird. But before you fully commit to each other, you need to be ready. You may not need to do it at that moment, but you need to be ready to. It's like, okay, I'm willing to share everything. I want you to see everything. I want to be an open book. This is part of me. This is my past. This is my present. This is my future, including my debts, including my obligations, whatever. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's why it's all part of the unification process. It's part of the road to one. So there's a whole lot of emotional stuff tied up to it for good reason.
And how do you ease that tension? Like whenever you, like with you guys, how would you ease that tension if you feel like your other significant is like, you're trying to talk about it and you could see the other just kind of withdrawn, but you want to talk about it in a nice way. How would you go about that?
Well, one thing that has made a big difference in our relationship is weekly meeting, and we do a lot in weekly meeting, but I'll let you know, I was very resistant to weekly meeting for a very long time. And so,
Free spirit.
Sweet Wes, he would make me a special latte and bring me treats. And he would, and we pre-agreed on Sunday afternoons while our kids were napping, we were gonna do our weekly meeting. And actually in the weekly meeting, we talk about budget, we talk about schedules, we talk about general expectation setting for other things. So he really did trick me with treats and coffee, for like 2 years. And then I was like, okay, I don't need the treats and coffee, and also we should move the time. Because now it's so much a part of how we operate that I don't need the treat anymore. But I would say, don't be above being like, hey, if you sit and have this hard
Bribery is what it's
conversation,
called.
I'm gonna get you this thing that you love, Like, will you sit and have this conversation with me over Thai food?
Part of
Maybe?
what you're doing is setting expectations. If she's really tired and kind of ready to relax, and you're like, hey, let's go into something that is emotionally taxing, if that makes sense. It might just be, that's not where I want to go right now, if that makes sense. So if you set expectations and say, hey, next Friday, I'd love to do this thing that you enjoy and talk about finances. Then she can be geared up. She's not finishing the Thai dinner ready to just like kind of completely let her guard down, if that makes sense. She's ready.
Yeah, we did that a little bit, just like setting the whole weekly on Wednesday. We wanted to start doing the Dave Ramsey financial piece thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for all the advice.
So I have to add something. Okay, I must add this to everybody. If there's something and you're hitting this every time it comes up in your partner, and there's like a fear or anxiety or stress, it may not be about your finances. it very well likely is probably not about your finances. It's probably about a child trauma, shame that somebody's put on you or them, fear around finances, maybe there was never enough, or there was a control in your house, one of the parents, or one of the parents wasn't present, and so the other one had to do all the providing, or they fought a lot over finances. If there is a real emotion that makes no sense around the conversation that, you're just talking about the future and it's not even real yet.
Nobody's in trouble.
Nobody's in trouble, this is like pretty light and there's something on that, then just stop and say, tell me about that. Wow. Can you tell me about that emotion? Just throw the finances off the table and say, tell me about that.
Good.
Can you remember when you first encountered that or felt that? Can you tell me more about that? And then just be present and listen and just say, I'm sorry. Wow, that must have been really hard. So, and hearing where they're coming from and what's on that is so powerful. Because this is what the whole conversation is about, is making it safe where it's never been safe before.
Yeah.
And if you're pushing it, we've got to talk about it, we got to work through this, we got to create this budget, that's the opposite of making it safe.
So true.
So find out why it's not safe first. Okay, sorry.
Come on.
I had to get on my
So
little
good.
horse. That's my little interrogate horse.
Speaking of debt, you have like different, I feel like we've really gone on the pendulum swing on Dave Ramsey. I feel like it's like, be miserable until you're out of debt. And then there's like the other pendulum swing, which is like, the Jesus is gonna come back, don't care about your debt. And so it's twofold. So I'd love to know like y'all's philosophy or perspective on debt. Have you had debt? How have you paid it down and what would you recommend with dealing with that in the midst of still wanting to like enjoy life? And then my second question is like a situational question.
I'm gonna let you start that question. You do that one.
It is worth reiterating. We said it earlier. Debt is not a sin. You don't. If you're holding shame about having debt, like just drop it. Jesus, here it is. There's the shame. Goodbye. Debt and shame don't go together. Got it? It's part of the balance sheet. And what it does, debt reduces your options essentially because you don't have a choice about where that payment goes. You might be able to restructure, but effectively it reduces your options because some of those dollars that could only go one place are going into that payment. My mind goes more to I love the snowball method, and if you've heard of that, of like trying to pay down the smallest one first. If you can make it feel fun or somehow jointly feel like you have a goal and you're getting on the same, like, okay, we have some joy, there's some life on this pathway, which might be somewhere in the middle, or it might be somewhere like, hey, the Lord's just giving us tons of freedom. We're going to pay the absolute minimum. We're going to restructure so we pay even it out over 50 years, whatever. The Lord is giving us freedom right now, and you have a lot of life on that together. Then that's the right moment. But it is really, it's powerful to just walk in unity on it together. And then there can be a lot of joy in the let's be miserable together because you feel joy in the prize. You're like, okay, it is only 7 months away. And we can have a ton of, and if you're having joy around those dates because it's just popcorn and a movie or whatever, it's about
movies are expensive. A movie at home.
Yeah. But basically, what gives you life when you guys are sitting and praying with it before the Lord? What sparks joy is and trying to say, Lord, how do we take? Because it is reality. Like you can't change the past, if that makes sense. You have the balance sheet.
I would
today.
just say, Wes, just to kind of clarify, if you're gonna take an approach on how you're gonna tackle your debt, it would be more enjoyable to say, what are we gonna do when we're not paying these debt payments? Like, what are we gonna do with that money? Because then, when you're not paying them, they'll feel like a prize. It'll feel like you got something, right?
Yeah.
And you'll kind of be holding a goal out in front of you. So, but I do, that snowball effect is effective. Just because you get some wins.
Yeah.
And that's that's the goal, right?
Right.
And there's some things that are like, if you can if you know that a raise is coming and you can pre-negotiate with yourselves in your mind, hey, half of that raise is going to go to paying down debt.
Right.
Then you've been able to, it's just very low stress threshold to go from, hey, we just got a raise, but we just started paying down our debt faster. That's way easier than we got to ratchet down how much we, so just, there are easier ways and harder ways to do it. So if you can make it easier on yourself, go, all right, I know a raise is coming. Let's take half of that and go, things like that.
Oh yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Okay. And thank you. The situational question was more like, if back in your financial advisor days, or if you're advising a family and you have, like, for example, for us, we've had conversations about how incredibly passionate we both are about buying a house in the future, being able to host presents and host people there, but also a huge passion to travel, and put our money there. And I feel like that's a conversation we have revisited several times, because it's not like one is, I want to have more groceries and I want to buy a house. It's like, no, these are two things that are taking a lot of money out, and how can we so I would love to hear like what that's like I feel like a marriage finance 401 class or something. Like how would you respond to that?
You said.
Well, I think we're there, truly. Like we bought a house after not being sure that was going to be an option for us for a while, and like the Lord gave us the house, which is really great. I'm like dying a little bit inside because I've been stuck at home so much. So, so like we're leaving this weekend because we're like, we still gotta leave. So kind of like, how do you balance? Again, these are both like, they're extras, right? And so I just kind of picked. I was like, hey, for this period of time, the extra, I'd like to finish the project so I can feel like that was kind of finished, because I felt like, at least with the house, houses always require more input, but there's a little bit more of an inline for me. But we also budget, we actually budget a fair amount every month for travel, and so then that's discretionary. So if we take like shorter trips, then I know that we're not saving for a bigger trip later. But that's where I actually think the boundary of the budget is really powerful, is because it allows us to say like, hey, we do have this that is discretionary for our travel. If I save it for this whole year, then we can do this.
I think what's coming to mind that's been really powerful for us as well is just this idea of writing down all your heart's desires. Lord, I would love to travel to this place and travel to this place, and I would love to do this with the house. And none of it has been, I don't know how to pay for any of it, you know? And being able to hold that before the Lord and tell him, Lord, I would like to do these things. And then and then for us, like when we go through those quarterly conversations or those annual conversations of, hey, here's the 7 things that we have no budget for. We don't know how to do them. We are able to actually pre-decide, like, okay, if the Lord blessed us with a little bit more, this is number 1, and this is number 2, or we would kind of be splitting it between these 2 things of kind of pre-deciding. And then you, it can be really motivating if you like kind of gig economy, or if you have ability to like surge a little bit to like, well, I know what the little bit more is going to go to, and I'm excited about that. I'm willing to surge into it, you know? So I think it's powerful from goal setting and just prayer, you know?
So, just real quick.
Sorry.
So, when you're talking about these things, you're saying they're coming from the money that's there. You're not saying creating debt to do these things.
Oh, no. The money exists.
Okay, money exists. Okay.
So we're talking about
the money exists.
And have y'all hit on what healthy debt is and what unhealthy debt, that you should separate those two out, or is that
it is worth talking through. Like, it can be really powerful to like take out debt to buy a house, for instance, because that's very different from I mean, one of the core biblical principles is live on spend less than you earn, basically.
Yeah.
And if you're just racking up debt because you're without intention, a lot of budgeting is actually living life on purpose, if that makes sense. If you just aren't living life on purpose and you're spending X more than is what's coming in, and you're racking up debt to cover that, that's toxic debt. It's not good. It's kind of mortgaging the future. It's forcing you to make payments in the future that are reducing your options in the future. So yeah.
Good.
So I have, me and Jonathan both have a question.
Nice.
So we're.
Oh, you.
He's right there. We both have two questions. So we're both LLCs, and this, like, we kind of talked about this in the line a little bit. But 1099, and one is, how do you like budget for that when it's high highs and low lows? And then my other question.
Far in betweens.
Yes, yes. And my other question, and my other question is, how do you cultivate your faith with your partner to bring God into the picture, to be like, yeah, everybody says God's gonna take care of you, but like, what actionable steps do you do that to like go into the place of like, wow, I'm actually trusting and believing that the Lord is going to provide for my next meal and my next paycheck and everything like that.
Okay, so before you said, he said they're both LLCs, so they're like, you know, their money is conditional on what they're making. So for those that couldn't hear that in the back,
They don't have a steady
so if
paycheck,
you're
do
thinking about being an entrepreneur at some point in time, this is a good question.
Yeah, I've lived it. It's not that fun in some ways, because one month you're making this much, and then it's this, and then it's this, and the problem is that you have no idea what the coming months are. Is the problem, and the number one thing is live with margin. Essentially, they put a little bit of a buffer in there if you can. I mean, one of the things that Dave Ramsey talks about, and it's just every financial book that you read would say, get a little bit of a buffer, at least $2,500 into the bank, because you don't know what's coming. And then if you live on highly variable income, trying to get 3 months into the bank account, so that as your baseline, so that, and then what that allows you to do is say, you have a pretty good, you probably have a pretty good idea of what will happen this year. And then you can divide that by 12 and say, this is our budget. If you have margin, and that's really what happens when you spend less than you earn, you live with margin. It's the same thing with time, same thing with money. When you have a little bit of margin, then you don't actually have to wire it to the minute, or to the dollar. So if you can live with 3 months buffer, then you really can just say the monthly budget is this, and then a couple eat into it, and then you bring it back up. And what you do with the big month is bring it back up to your 3 month, and it's kind of this false zero in your account. People talk about that in financial books sometimes, is like this pretend zero in your account, is that you pretend like X number that's 3 months is zero, if that makes sense. And then you just live with this. There's an incredible amount of just feeling like the pressure is off when you have that false zero, because it allows little wobbles to, and it takes a while. That can be a goal for you to set together, of like, hey, together we would love to have this false zero that is this number that we treat as like the zero in our account.
What did you do the first year?
That is how, so we went into our first year with a lot of margin.
Gotcha.
We sold our house.
And so that is how we do it, is the higher volatility.
There was no volatility.
There was no
just
volatility.
Zero after zero after zero. It was perfectly flat.
I'm gonna say this. There actually was a false zero at that point, and it was pre-agreed. And we've actually worked with a couple couples who have done something similar to what we've done, where they sell their house, drop everything, make a big career change, and have nothing coming in. And it's actually really powerful to agree to the false zero before you do that. So we said, essentially, when we hit X number in our bank account,
which
one
again
of us
was
is getting another job.
3 months from totally,
which is 3 months
the world
from
ends.
nothing. And and a little extra, right? Because we like margin. But our friends who have kind of walked that road without having a lot of really good conversation around money hit actual zero, and it feels horrible if you hit actual zero.
Problem was that they hit actual zero, but they both did. Only one of them knew it.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
yeah.
anyway,
Yeah.
these are the kinds of things that you get yourself into when you don't have really
Wow.
transparent conversations about money. They are wonderful people and we love them.
Yeah.
But
does that address both?
does that help
Yeah.
your question? We actually, that
That-
false zero,
that-
even when no money comes in, is still a false zero in our mind. And we set ourselves up to move into that season with a lot of faith, but a healthy margin.
Gotcha.
And that's actually how we still kind of, and so we set a budget that we can live on, and then we know kind of highs and lows come, and we actually don't change our budget.
Is that the same way you like cultivate faith of like relying that the Lord is going to provide for you?
You know,
Or,
honestly, I feel like the Holy Spirit really, for me, brought up that lie where I felt like, I think there was just like a moment when Wes was first had his other job and I had stopped working, and I was like, the money could stop. And I felt really afraid and I felt really vulnerable.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of confronting that feeling, and honestly, I just, I asked the Lord, I was like, heal my heart, and it took years, but any moment that feeling would come, I would kind of just confront it with truth, and I would say, the Lord is my provider, and I have everything that I need, and there is nothing that I lack, not in our finances, not in my relationships. I don't live with lack, because I've got a Father who owns everything.
Come on.
And so it was really, though, a lot of years of being really quick to identify that that can go away, and say, I'm not afraid of that, because I've got a Father in heaven who gives me everything that I need, and I don't lack for anything, and He is my provision. And in those moments, actually, the Holy Spirit started confronting me when I felt really good about our money. Like He would bless us with something, and I'd be like, yes, and He'd be like, is that where your satisfaction, your happiness comes from?
Ooh, that's good.
And it really was actually the Holy Spirit in those moments too, where I'd say, God, you are my provider, and you give me all the things. Like, would you remind my heart and draw me into that in these seasons of blessing? Because sometimes in the seasons of blessing, you know, everything's ticking along, and so we just have to say, like, it was really good. You are my provider, and you give me all the things, and I will have everything that I need. And so it was kind of that same line, but honestly, it was just a lot of training my heart, and asking the Holy Spirit, like, hey, on this issue, I'm sensing some fear, and a lot of, would you train my heart on this? And honestly, it was really powerful for Him to prepare the way when there was no crisis. We had plenty of money, and we were setting our budget, and we were kind of conversing with the Lord on how to do that, and He was meeting all of our needs, and a lot of things that we wanted to do anyways. And I think part of that journey of Him showing me those things that we wrote down that we didn't have money to do was Him training my heart, saying, like, see, I'm gonna provide for you. But that was just, you know, that's these are like the basics of growing in Jesus, right? We find something in us and we attend to His Spirit, and we say, would you align my spirit with your truth, because you're my provider and I have everything that I need. So I know that's like I mean, maybe it's more practical than I think, but that's what I did.
Yeah.
So.
Joey, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
I think, and you guys have talked about it a little bit, but I think aligning the budget and the finances with the vocation, mission, and purpose of your life, you know, as if you feel God calling you into something, you know, trusting Him through the highs and the lows, right? Whereas you could go get another job, right?
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think, and it's awesome that we met in line, so I actually can picture you on the. What recently it's about what I experienced was it's so much about watching our hearts as entrepreneurs, and really any profession, watching our hearts. I was feeling a significant amount of stress and was able to see I had a whole series of goals, a bunch of people that I needed to convince to do, to make a bunch of decisions, basically. And I don't control other people's decisions.
Right.
And I was just carrying this weight of trying to convince a bunch of people to make a bunch of decisions. And as I held that before the Lord, I realized I had to let go of that. Like, it is not on me to carry this, basically. And so I actually started, it wasn't like, oh snap, this is over. I had to just keep going and leaning, and I started testifying to a number. People would ask how I was doing, and I'd say, here's my core heart issue. I'm struggling to let go of this, and I'm leaning into it. And just started kind of going after the Lord, like, would you help me to let go of this to the point where it's fully open hands, and that this capital raising thing that I'm trying to do is fully in his hands. And so it just took this over, I don't know, a 10-day period of being like, no, I am gonna let go of this, basically, if that makes sense. And so, but it was watching my heart to say, I'm feeling a lot of, I'm feeling stress. I'm worrying about this. So watch your heart is basically, that's what would apply to everything, of like watching your heart to see, because even on it, if you're worrying or if you're just seeing bad fruit, basically, that you don't like, to say, Lord, I am not happy that I am worrying about this thing at work. I am not happy that I'm not that I'm responding in this way, and say, Lord, please help me. And then starting to testify to your friends, like I am going after the Lord until he helps me have a good attitude about the budget with my wife.
Come on.
You know, like I've had a terrible attitude historically over the last 2 years or something, like, and just start testifying, like I'm pursuing the Lord on this, you know?
Yeah, that's good.
Does that help a little bit?
There's somebody else over here too that had a
A
question.
little bit, yeah, thank you.
At the very end, Dennis.
Hey, thanks for coming, guys. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
And naval officers, like, whoa, you know. So you guys are like, you know discipline and stuff really well, and like understand each other on that level as well. So like, you mentioned something earlier where you said the partner he gave you won't hold you back, which is awesome.
Yeah.
As you guys are setting goals now, are you because you're like, oh, sometimes you have to wait for the other one. You kind of know, like in your heart, like this is gonna come to fruition when they're ready, when Wes is ready, when Christy's ready.
Yeah.
How are you setting, like, what's the frequency of goal setting for you now? I know you said that you kind of revisit, you have a heavier budget talk every quarter, and then a big one every year, and you try to make it happen once a week. But as you're like speaking of goals with each other now, how does that form? And then are you also now 16 years in, are you kind of at this point where you're like, I hear what she's saying, or I hear what he's saying, that's a hard goal, I'm not there yet, but you kind of know, like, yeah, that's the next direction we have to take. Like, how frequent are you guys setting goals together, and what does that look like?
This is why I love talking about money frequently, is I feel like things get introduced in small ways frequently, like because we're doing life together, raising a family together. Like somebody will throw out like, oh, I want to do this, and then this is where that weekly meeting that I had to get tricked into has actually been a powerful tool in our marriage, especially as we have the kids and we just actually don't we don't have private conversations anymore. Like, what was that you said? Yeah.
Before 8:30 or 9 p.m.
Yeah, it's like 9 p.m. and they're still just like, so are we talking about money? And we're like, we're talking about not your money. So I feel like that weekly meeting actually is a huge check-in point for us that really starts planting seeds for kind of bigger conversations that we're going to have in the future about that. And you'll find a lot of this as you make talking about your money and your goals, a lot of these conversations really do happen organically. As you're pursuing unity on all things and having frequent budget talks, like I said, those seeds that are smaller start to get planted, and you start to hear each other and you start to be changed by each other. And then, if he's mentioned something a couple of times, I'm kind of like, so, maybe when one of those weekly sit downs that we have where we know we're going to be talking about things like that. I'm like, so can you kind of unpack that for me? What did you mean when you said you wanted to invest in this thing? Are you talking like soon? Are
It's
you
really
thinking
powerful
like
because
this
you
is
don't always mean what the other person meant.
right? Because he does work with a lot of businesses, and I know he gets really excited. So I'm like, oh, I heard you saying this to your friend, like, so we're not doing that bathroom, and again though, there's like a lot of trust that's been built up, so he knows that I'm not coming here and him feeling like anxious or begging or needing to control it. I'm just like, oh, I heard you mention that, can you unpack that a little bit for me? So that's where I feel like those weekly check-in times can be really helpful, especially as like life happens and you get busy and you just need a space where you can actually have that conversation. So it does happen, I think, fairly organically. A lot of the things when we're doing those big annual conversations, I can't actually think of a time where he sprung something on me and I was like, that's new, you know, because we're doing life together and I hear what's on his heart frequently, so.
It's powerful to have a context where you can regularly kind of like log away, hey, I heard something that really caught my ear, and bring it up. So this is around money, but it really can apply to sorry, this is my time, but it applies to money as well. I traveled 5 times in the first 8 weeks of this year, and we were just on a very high cadence. And we were over at there were 2 different social situations. I forget the first one. And Christy just kind of showed a little bit of emotion of like, wow, Wes has been gone a lot. That caught my ear, and I was like, I need to ask her about that. And then in the weekly meeting, I pulled the string a little bit, and I got a lot. It was like,
I cried, and I was like, are you kidding? He's like, no, I wasn't, but.
But it was really good. We actually got to we were able to really, I was able to hear her like, all right, this has been harder than I realized for me to be gone 5 times. And we ended up shifting some of our time allocation and pulling 1 or 2 trips off the calendar because we realized, okay, our family is redlining in a way that I didn't realize. But it was a comfortable, it was about as low threat of a moment as I could to be like, hey, remember when you responded this way in front of friends?
When we're sitting together ready to talk about our schedule,
yeah.
right?
And she hadn't responded in a way that embarrassed me. I don't think anybody remembered.
No.
But I heard an edge in her voice that I was like, something's there more than I expected, if that makes sense.
So this is why we're like, set up those times, right? Because when he asked me, I wasn't trying to do something else. Our kids weren't around, and we were ready to talk about our next schedule, right? So it felt like an appropriate time. So similarly, if you're having budget conversations, and there's something that bothered you, setting up weekly times to check in with each other means you can have an appropriate conversation at the right time, not when you're like, don't decide whether or not you have money to go out to eat when you're hungry and driving by your favorite restaurant, right? It's that.
Because you might say, hey, I heard an edge in your voice around, like, I just sensed something when you're talking about that Amazon purchase. You pull the string a little bit and they start sharing, and you get into, I really want to buy a house and I don't feel like we're on path. Like, oh, wow. But it's the right context. That is the right time to bring that up. It's not when you're driving kids to whatever. So if you can get these regular rhythms, you can pull the strings in the right way where you hear your spouse's heart or your significant other's heart.
So that, and we would love to honor your time, but
Yes.
thank you for having us, and I don't want to make you guys later.
First of all, thank you guys.
Yeah.